need to move. This row's for builders, not you." The words hit sharper than turbulence at 35,000 feet. They weren't screamed, just dropped, cold and casual, like lint off a designer's suit. But they echoed. Through the cabin, through the silence, through her. Amari Pierce didn't move. She just stood there, calm as marble, eyes locked on the man now lounging across seats 1A and 1B like he built the damn aircraft himself. He was white, mid-50s, expensive cufflinks, arrogant posture. And right now, he was trying to erase her with nothing but tone. "This is my seat," she said simply, showing her boarding pass. 1B, A. Pierce. He didn't even glance. "I paid for this entire row. Maybe you're confused. Economy's back that way." Phones started recording. No one said a word, but the air thickened like fog rolling through glass. You've seen moments like this, haven't you? One person, one insult, one moment that reveals everything. Tell us where you're watching from. And what would you have done if it were you standing there? Seat stolen, dignity challenged, and everyone watching in silence. Because Amari Pierce didn't yell. She didn't curse. She didn't explain who she was. She didn't need to. It took her 3 quiet seconds to decide. Then she gently lowered her leather case beside the seat and opened her phone. Not to call anyone, not to complain, but to connect. To a system only 3 people in the country could access. Her thumb hovered over an app icon marked in faint silver, IEL, Interlink Ethics Ledger. A command console built for exactly this kind of abuse, and she knew it was time. 4 hours earlier, Amari had been sitting in a quiet corner of the Sky Lounge at Denver International, going over her talking points for the FAA's Ethics Summit in DC. The irony of it wouldn't hit her until much later. She had just come from Unity Nexus headquarters, where she'd signed off on Phase 2 of a national rollout, integrating behavior-linked protocols into boarding authorizations across 42 airports. For her, it was more than tech. It was a system built to prevent exactly what was happening now. But those were dashboards, algorithms. This was personal. Gregory Whitman didn't know who she was yet, but the system did. Behind her, a flight attendant hovered, young, uncertain, clearly rattled. Her name tag read Sandra. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, voice small. Gregory didn't even look at her, just gestured dismissively. "I'm fine. She's just confused. Happens sometimes. Like it was routine for a black woman in first class to be mistaken for staff." Amari didn't flinch. She simply typed, OBD-17. The screen blinked. A green dot appeared. Obsidian Directive armed. And just like that, the countdown began. At second 45, boarding gates at Atlanta, JFK, Dallas Love, and Seattle began flashing red. Passenger validation failed. System overrides were denied. By minute 2, 6 airlines had frozen boarding activity due to unexplained ethics sync errors. By minute 4, FAA ops flagged a level 2 incident, and the aircraft Amari was on received a silent tag. Diversion pending. Gregory, meanwhile, was struggling with his phone. "No signal? What kind of airline doesn't have working Wi-Fi?" He turned to Sandra. "Reset the router or whatever. This is ridiculous." She tried to smile. Failed. "Sir, the flight is being rerouted to St. Louis for technical evaluation." Gregory blinked. "Because of her?" He pointed straight at Amari. "She caused this? I said something she didn't like and now we're all grounded." Silence. No support. Not a nod. Except, maybe, from the man in 2C, who leaned toward his seatmate. "That's Amari Pierce," he whispered. "Wait, Unity Nexus?" "Yep." Phones were still recording, and Gregory's world was quietly unraveling. By minute 7, the FAA's legal team was on a call with DOT. Passenger Equity Act, shelved for 7 years, was being reviewed for urgent reinstatement. By the time the plane touched down in St. Louis, 6 airline CEOs had received alerts. $2.6 billion in federal compliance contracts were locked, pending ethics investigation. And Gregory Whitman? He was still trying to get a signal. Still had no idea the woman he'd tried to push out of seat 1B had just pulled the entire industry to a halt. She didn't even look at him as she exited. Didn't need to. The moment and the system had already spoken for her. Gregory Whitman stormed off the plane like it owed him an apology. His face was red, his breath short, his phone still dead. No signal, no Wi-Fi, no one catering to his usual storm of demands. As he stepped into the jet bridge at St. Louis International, he barked at the nearest gate agent, holding up his phone like a badge of entitlement. "Who do I speak to about this mess? I was rerouted midair over..." "What? Some glitch?" The agent, a young Latina woman named Carla, gave a tight, trained smile. "Sir, I believe operations will follow up with you shortly. Please proceed to gate 34 for a holding area." Gregory huffed and rolled his eyes, dragging his bag with exaggerated frustration. Around him, passengers from the same flight watched in silence. Some looked away. Others pulled out their phones again. This time not to record, but to forward what they'd already posted. Because by the time Gregory's Gucci loafers hit the terminal floor, the video of him sneering at a black woman in first class had already hit 2 million views, and counting. Meanwhile, in a sleek government building 5 blocks from Capitol Hill, a meeting was already underway, one that wasn't on anyone's calendar that morning. The FAA's senior ethics officer had just received the 5th consecutive boarding shutdown alert, and this wasn't technical. This wasn't a glitch. This was intentional. "Obsidian Directive?" the chief of operations asked, flipping through the printed log feed like it was radioactive. "Yes," said the internal counsel. "Level 3 ethics breach initiated by root certifier A. Pierce at 1614 ES10. The room went quiet, because they all knew what that meant. Amari Pierce wasn't just a CEO. She wasn't just the creator of the Unified Access Layer. She held emergency override clearance for the Interlink Ethics Ledger, a system designed after the 2016 scandal where a black air marshal was wrongfully detained in first class and no one was held accountable. That's when the federal government finally allowed certain ethics certifiers to create protocols that weren't just recommendations, but enforceable system triggers. They were never meant to be used. Until now. By the time the FAA's Emergency Ethics Committee gathered, 6 airline CEOs were already on encrypted Zoom calls, faces pale, voices flat. "We just lost boarding rights in 42 locations," one said. "Our systems are showing invalid ID across 5 time zones," another added. And then the kicker, "We're getting hit financially. A freeze just locked $2.6 billion in ESG-linked contracts." Dead silence. Then a voice came over the intercom. "We've confirmed the directive code used was OBD-17, logged by Amari Pierce." Someone whispered, "Obsidian." That wasn't just a protocol. That was the nuclear button. Back in St. Louis, Amari sat in a private holding room, sipping water and reviewing the headlines. Her phone, now reconnected to the secured network, showed what she already suspected. Hatch CETA was trending globally. Hatched Knower Name had climbed into the top 5 hashtags in under 4 hours. News anchors were narrating the exact moment Gregory had sneered. "This rose for builders, not you." They didn't even need to add commentary. The footage said it all. She wasn't smiling, wasn't basking in some righteous glow. Her eyes were steady, focused, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about exposure. She didn't ground one man. She grounded a system. A knock on the door broke the silence. It was a tall black man in a sharp blue suit, wearing an FAA credentials badge clipped to his jacket. He looked calm, but alert, like someone used to walking into chaos and clearing it quietly. "Ms. Pierce," he said, nodding. "I'm Jordan Dade, FAA Deputy Director of Compliance. We've been briefed on everything. I'm here to debrief you personally." Amari stood, extending a hand. "I figured you'd show up eventually. You pulled the most powerful trigger we've built," he said. "Of course I showed up. They sat across from each other in the quiet room as Dade reviewed the technical report. "You initiated OBD-17, he said plainly, which means, by protocol, this is a confirmed ethics violation, with supporting video, time-stamped behavior, and a direct compromise to cabin dignity policy." Amari nodded once. "Correct. And you understand what that means? That 6 airlines are now being reviewed for compliance breach, and 2.6 billion federal-linked contracts are frozen until further notice." Dade closed the folder. "You understand it better than most." There was a pause. He leaned forward slightly. "Off the record, that was one hell of a move." Amari didn't smile, but her eyes flashed with something sharper. It wasn't a move. It was a warning shot. Across the country, airline executives were scrambling. Investors panicked. Board members demanded emergency meetings, and journalists began dragging out the very documents Gregory Whitman himself had signed, blocking the Passenger Equity Act years ago. Turns out, the man who stole a seat from a black woman on Thursday was the same man who helped kill a law protecting passenger dignity in 2018. You can't buy that kind of irony. But now the bill was coming back, and this time, it was personal. By midnight, the Secretary of Transportation had issued a statement. "The recent incident involving federal systems and ethics protocols has triggered a full review of airline passenger conduct policies. We are working with stakeholders, including Unity Nexus CEO Amari Pierce, to ensure that dignity and equity are not optional. They are mandatory." And that was it. The tide had turned. Somewhere around 2:30 a.m., Gregory Whitman finally got a call back from his lawyer. It wasn't good. "Greg," the voice said, tight and cold, "I need to advise you to deactivate all social. Pull out of any scheduled public events, and we're hearing from your board." "My board?" Gregory asked, like he didn't understand the word. "They want your resignation, by noon." "You can't be serious." "They're very serious. Your name is tanking everything." "It was just a seat." "No, Greg," the lawyer said flatly. "It was a system, and you pissed off the woman who designed it." Somewhere else across the city, Amari sat alone in her hotel room in D.C. No champagne, no press team, no gloating. Just a tablet glowing softly in her lap. She opened the Passenger Equity Act draft, last updated 6 years ago. Still full of red lines. Still gathering dust. Until tonight. Her fingers hovered over the screen, rewriting 2 paragraphs, updating compliance conditions. Because she knew what was coming. This wasn't just a viral moment. It wasn't just a PR win. This was the beginning of a full reform wave. One that couldn't be buried under money or noise this time, because now the whole world had seen what disrespect looked like in row 1B, and what happened when the wrong woman decided not to take it sitting down. When Gregory Whitman stepped into the boardroom at Lexan Strategic the next morning, he didn't recognize the energy. It wasn't tense, it was cold, sterile, like the temperature had been dropped just for him. His executive assistant didn't meet his eyes. His general counsel sat 3 seats away instead of next to him, and the coffee in front of his chair was still in a paper cup, not the custom ceramic mug labeled chairman he was used to. Something had shifted. Gregory adjusted his tie, still clinging to the performance. He straightened his blazer, pulled out the chair, sat. The screen at the far end of the table blinked to life. On it, a paused video still. His face, mid-sentence, finger out, sneering. "You need to move. This row's for builders, not you." No one said a word. Not yet. Across town in Washington, D.C., Amari Pierce was already on her second meeting of the morning. Her voice was calm, her notes precise, her posture perfect. She sat across from a panel of senior FAA regulators and Department of Transportation officials. The moment wasn't new to her, but the stakes were. One night ago, she had brought the U.S. commercial aviation system to a 7-minute ethical standstill. Now, she was being asked to explain why that wasn't an overreach. She didn't flinch. "Obsidian wasn't created to punish," she said, eyes clear. "It exists because systems tend to protect power unless someone designs them not to. The room stayed quiet, listening. "You want to know if I'd do it again?" she added. "I would." Back in New York, Gregory cleared his throat and finally tried to speak. "I think we're blowing this entire thing out of proportion. It was a misunderstanding, something personal, not policy." Wrong choice of words. His CFO leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Greg, 6 airlines have frozen partnerships with us. 3 of our ESG funds were pulled overnight, and our name is trending alongside the word bigot in 14 countries." Someone clicked the mouse. The video started playing again, this time with captions. Under his words, the subtitle read, "Whitman, seated in 1A, gestures dismissively. People like you don't belong up here." Gregory closed his eyes for half a second. "That wasn't what I meant." "No one cares what you meant," the legal advisor said. "They care what it looked like and who you said it to." "She didn't even identify herself," he argued. Silence. Then someone finally broke. "Greg, she didn't have to, because she built the system that's now making us bleed money." Amari left the regulatory meeting to a flurry of reporters crowding the marble steps outside the FAA building. Microphones extended like reaching hands. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. "Ms. Pierce, were you targeting Mr. Whitman personally? Did you intend to freeze $2.6 billion in contracts? Are you now the most powerful woman in aviation?" She paused for a beat, then answered only one. "I didn't freeze anything. I held a mirror. The system did the rest." She kept walking. That line would be quoted across 3 news cycles, written on protest signs, and printed on T-shirts by noon. Inside Unity, Nexus headquarters, the mood was different. Focused, electric. Employees walked faster. Meetings overflowed. The analytics dashboard showed over 7 million active pings across the unified access layer in the past 12 hours. But the most critical update came from legal. "Amari," her general counsel said, "we have 14 requests for implementation of a permanent ethics-binding protocol from airlines." "Voluntary?" she asked. "Technically, yes, but after yesterday, let's just say no one wants to be the next trending clip." She smiled slightly, then stopped. "Don't let them just rebrand. Make them commit." Meanwhile, Gregory wasn't in his corner office anymore. The board had moved his things without waiting for permission. His name was already off the internal server, his parking pass revoked, his company credit card disabled. The press release had been drafted the moment the Obsidian directive had reached the 3rd airline. "You'll retain your shares, Greg, but you're done speaking for us. You're finished in aviation," the COO added quietly. "And you'll be lucky if finance doesn't follow." Gregory stood up, but not with the same confidence he'd always carried. It was shaky, grasping. He grabbed his coat and walked out without another word. As the doors closed behind him, no one looked up. At a nearby university campus in Atlanta, a group of political science students watched the replay of Amari's debriefing. Their professor paused the screen and turned. "This is what systemic accountability looks like in real time. What's the lesson?" A young woman raised her hand. "That you don't have to yell to dismantle a system. That sometimes power is silent, but absolute." Late that night, Amari sat alone in her office, the city lights blinking beyond the windows. Her desk was mostly clear, except for one thing: a worn paper boarding pass. Seat 1B. She picked it up, studied it, then slid it gently into a glass display case. Not for ego, for memory. Because moments like that, where dignity meets action, deserve to be remembered, not as rage, but as architecture. At 11:43 p.m., she received a short message from the DOT. "The Passenger Equity Act has been scheduled for special congressional review. Lead advisor, Amari Pierce." She didn't smile, but she finally exhaled. Meanwhile, Gregory sat in the back seat of a black car, staring at his dark phone screen. No emails, no calls, just article after article with his name next to headlines like, "The seat that cost $2.6 billion. Obsidian directive, when systems push back." She didn't move, the industry did. His driver didn't speak. Neither did he. But in the silence, Gregory finally understood something no boardroom or balance sheet had taught him. You can buy your way into first class, but you can't buy the right to take away someone else's seat. The next 72 hours felt less like news and more like a reckoning. Across the country, terminals flickered with delays. Airline spokespeople scrambled to issue apologies. And inside the FAA's downtown DC headquarters, a phrase echoed across every floor. Obsidian wasn't just an alert, it was a shutdown. By the end of day 3, 6 airlines remained locked out of Unified Access Layer, Amari's boarding protocol system, used across 42 U.S. airports. And now the FAA had a choice to make. Either pretend this was an overcorrection, or admit, finally, that the system had allowed this kind of bias to fester unchecked for years. They chose the second. In room 213 of the DOT's Ethics and Oversight Division, Amari Pierce sat across from a congressional subcommittee. It wasn't televised. Not yet. But the room buzzed with the tension of history pressing its hand against the door. To her left sat 2 legal advisors. On her right, Jordan Dade from the FAA. In front of her, 5 representatives, 2 of whom had once voted against the Passenger Equity Act. The other 3, watching her like she might light the room on fire or rewrite the rules of gravity. She chose to do neither. Instead, she opened her laptop, clicked play, and let the now viral 48-second clip roll one more time. Gregory's voice came through the speakers, clear, arrogant, unforgettable. This rouse for builders, not you. No reaction, just silence. She paused it on the freeze frame, his face mid-sneer. Then she turned her screen back toward herself. I didn't crash a system, she said. I exposed one. The youngest representative leaned forward. You understand, Ms. Pierce, that freezing $2.6 billion in compliance contracts set off national panic? No, Amari replied. Discrimination set off national panic. I just refused to smooth it over. The room went still. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean forward. She didn't blink. And that's what made it land harder. Meanwhile, outside the building, the public was choosing sides, and fast. Protesters held up signs that read, #Seat 1B belongs to everyone. Respect isn't optional. She didn't ground the plane. She grounded privilege. But not everyone was cheering. One major airline CEO went on record blaming overreach by unelected tech actors. Another said Amari had weaponized ethics to punish a competitor. That one was ironic, because Gregory Whitman had personally invested in 4 of the 6 companies under investigation. Their PR spin wasn't working. Every time a reporter tried to cast doubt on Amari's actions, someone reposted the video. Or a new clip from an airport gate where black and brown passengers shared stories of being removed, relocated, or ignored. Amari hadn't just made a decision. She'd opened a vault of stories the system had tried to bury for decades. Back inside her office at Unity Nexus, the calls poured in. A West Coast airline offered full implementation of the Passenger Ethics Suite. A European Aviation Coalition requested a briefing. 2 Ivy League universities asked to build curriculum around what was now being called the Seat 1B shutdown. But Amari didn't rush to respond. She knew better than anyone. Hype fades fast. Systems are what last. So she sat quietly with her team and mapped out 3 phases. Immediate reassessment standards. Unified Ethics Integration, UEI, for airlines voluntarily adopting the protocol. Red flag reinstatement, allowing any passenger to anonymously flag in-flight ethics violations that would trigger review within 48 hours. This wasn't about going viral. It was about making sure no one else had to lose dignity in silence. Later that evening, Amari got a request. It came from a woman named Diane Fielding, chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. The message was short. I voted against your act 7 years ago. Now I need you to help me pass it. Across town, in a luxury apartment where Gregory Whitman once held fundraisers, he sat alone, half-dressed, half-drunk, watching the same clip that now haunted him. He tried to convince himself that it was still salvageable, that he could do an apology tour, rebrand, get on a podcast, maybe cry. But then his lawyer called again. "Greg, they've opened a formal investigation. SEC is reviewing your aviation ties, ESG regulators too." "On what basis?" he snapped. "On the one you gave them, your mouth." Gregory hung up without saying goodbye. He looked down at his phone and watched a live stream of a third-grade girl reading a letter to Amari at a school assembly. "Dear Ms. Pierce, thank you for being brave, so people like me don't feel like we're wrong for being here." He shut the laptop, and for the first time he felt small, not publicly, privately, where the real lessons cut deepest. The next morning, Amari walked back into room 213. Same table, same lawmakers. But this time, she carried a new file, a revised version of the Passenger Equity Act, one that now included digital bias tracking for all customer service interactions, ethics training tied to root certification, quarterly transparency audits published for public review. She handed each of them a copy, then looked up. "The system wasn't broken," she said. "It was just never built for everyone." No one interrupted her this time. By week's end, FAA issued a press release. Effective immediately, the Interlink Ethics Ledger will become an official standard across all certified commercial carriers. The Passenger Equity Act has been approved for fast-track legislative reentry, with Unity Nexus listed as lead systems partner. And just like that, a seat became a symbol. That Sunday morning, Amari visited her mother in Newark. They sat on the same porch where Amari used to study on summer nights, dreaming about building tech that made people feel seen. Her mother poured coffee. "So, you finally did it," she said. Amari smiled, just a little. "Did what?" "You made the whole country sit up and listen, and you did it without shouting." Amari looked out at the street. The sun caught on a little girl's backpack as she ran by. Her face beamed as her dad held up a boarding pass and said, "Guess who gets to sit by the window today?" Amari leaned back. "Yeah, I guess I did." And across every gate and every major U.S. airport that week, something subtle had changed. Not just the scanners, not just the code, but the culture. People looked differently, spoke more carefully, thought twice before dismissing someone based on their hair, their skin, their silence. Because now they knew. That seat you're trying to take? It might just belong to the person who designed the whole damn plane. When Amari stepped back into Unity Nexus headquarters the following Monday, the building wasn't louder. It was quieter, but it wasn't silence from fear. It was the kind of quiet you hear when people are focused, leaning in, watching the screen, writing a new chapter in real time. The kind you feel when your entire company realizes, we don't just work in tech anymore, we're part of a movement now. Her assistant, Jen, met her at the elevator holding a black tablet. "You've got 47 media requests, CNN, MSNBC, Forbes, even a podcast called Corporate Karma." "Decline all of them," Amari said, without breaking stride. Jen blinked. "All of them?" "We're not selling a story," Amari replied. "We're building infrastructure." In the main conference room, her leadership team was already gathered. The screen showed a live analytics feed, a map of U.S. airports flickering in real time, lines of boarding activity, re-verified ethics protocols, flag reports from active flights. 92% of flights now use the updated UAL platform. 27 airlines had submitted requests to join Ethics Sync Tier 1 voluntarily, and that was just the beginning. "Any updates on the passenger-triggered alert system?" Amari asked, taking her seat. James, her head of systems, nodded. "Prototypes live in 4 markets. If a passenger gets mistreated, the flag links directly to their airline's compliance record, and then into ours." "Good," she said. "Make it seamless. No forms. One tap. Their experience should be the feedback." The room nodded. No applause. No fanfare. Just execution. Just exactly what she had taught them to do. Meanwhile, Gregory Whitman was doing something very different. He sat in a soundstage in Los Angeles, under 3 layers of makeup, getting ready to record an exclusive sit-down interview. This was his last move, the redemption arc, the rebrand, the "I've learned and grown" speech. The PR firm had worked the angle hard. A powerful man, humbled. A nation divided. A chance to heal. Gregory wasn't sure he believed any of it, but he did know one thing. He hated losing. The cameras rolled. He looked directly at the lens, lowered his voice, and said, "I think we're all learning in this moment. I've made mistakes. I regret how I came across, but I believe in second chances, and I believe we all deserve grace." What he didn't know was that while the interview was being filmed, a second clip had just gone viral. Gregory, filmed just days earlier at a private club in Aspen, saying to someone off camera, "That girl, she weaponized a glitch and blew up 6 airlines. Good for her little tech cult." Boom, everything he tried to reclaim just collapsed. Again, back at Unity Nexus, no one even brought up Gregory's interview. They didn't have to. Instead, the legal team presented Amari with a list of 11 new incoming proposals. Airlines offering partial equity, data access, or infrastructure if Unity Nexus would help them rebuild ethics protocols. "Only 2 of them ever returned our calls before this week," someone noted. Amari raised a brow. "Now they want ethics to be a brand?" "Feels like it," legal replied. She didn't respond. She just leaned back, crossed her arms, and said, "Then we don't sell them the brand. We license them the discipline." The next morning, Amari joined a private Zoom call with the European Aviation Safety Agency, Canadian Transportation Bureau, and 4 African airlines working toward UAL integration. They weren't calling to congratulate her. They wanted a partnership. Because what Amari had done wasn't just a US story anymore. It was global. A ripple across the ethics landscape of international travel. A new expectation in how passengers deserve to be treated. A quiet warning that sorry wouldn't fix systems anymore. But inside Amari's office, things were personal again. She received a letter, not an email, a real handwritten letter. It was from a former flight attendant who had once been written up for refusing to reseat a young black boy who had a first-class ticket. The letter read, "They called it policy compliance, but I called it wrong. Thank you for making us all look again. We needed this." Amari closed the note gently. No smile, just quiet recognition. This is why she started. Across the street, a camera crew stood in the rain, trying to get a shot of Unity Nexus HQ through the glass. "She still hasn't given a single public interview," the reporter said. "Not even a press release, just silence, strategy, code." Then the anchor added, "And yet she's already changed more than most elected leaders have in a decade." That night, Amari walked the floor of her company alone. No entourage, no lights. Just the hum of servers, the reflection of dashboards, the flicker of the systems they'd built. She stopped at a wall where her team had pinned messages from passengers. Some printed tweets, some emails, some letters. One from a veteran, one from a single mom, one from a child who said, "I used to be scared to sit in the front. Not anymore." She exhaled, let herself feel it for just a second. Then she turned back to her glass-walled office, where a single item sat on her desk. That boarding pass, seat 1B. She didn't touch it this time. She didn't need to, because now, the whole world had already read what it meant. The car that pulled up in front of Unity Nexus wasn't marked with any airline logo, just sleek, silent black steel. Inside sat Clara Hastings, newly appointed CEO of Ascendant Air, the 3rd largest U.S. airline, and the first of the 6 suspended carriers to publicly acknowledge their ethics failure. On paper, Clara was exactly what the industry wanted right now. Young, Ivy League, liberal, clean record, a woman for optics, and most importantly, not Gregory Whitman. She stepped out of the car in a sand-colored power suit, hair pulled into a low bun, no jewelry, a smile that hovered halfway between nervous and calculated. She carried only one thing in her hand, a slim folder labeled Ethical Reconciliation Proposal, Tier A. Amari didn't meet her in the lobby. She let Clara walk past 4 layers of glass before finally stepping into the Echo Room, a soundproof, screen-free space on the 6th floor used only for off-record conversations. The room had no chairs, just a single long table and white walls. Neutral ground. "Ms. Hastings," Amari greeted, not offering her hand. "Thank you for making time. I know your schedule is full," Amari finished. "So let's make this fast." Clara smiled again, just barely. She laid the folder down. Inside, a carefully worded proposal. Ascendant Air would implement the full passenger ethics protocol, join the Interlink Ethics Ledger, and launch a joint initiative with Unity Nexus, if granted a public partnership announcement. Translation: they wanted Amari's name more than her code. "You're the future," Clara said softly. "And if we want this industry to change, we can't fight you. We need to walk with you." Amari didn't respond. She just studied Clara's face, her tone, her pacing, her word choice. It wasn't fake, but it wasn't pure either. It was measured, market-tested, like someone who'd practiced allyship just long enough to wear it like tailored clothing. Amari turned to the wall, then back. "What changed?" she asked. Clara blinked. "Sorry?" "6 months ago, your company helped Gregory lobby against the same charter you're now offering to fund. So, I'll ask again, what changed?" Clara's smile flickered. She didn't answer for a long beat. Then finally, "We got scared." There it was. The truth, clean and bare. "Look," Clara said, exhaling. "I don't agree with how Gregory handled it. But this industry is messy. It's old. Built by people who never saw passengers as people. I'm trying to flip that." Amari nodded once. "No cameras. No joint statement. If you want in, you do it like the rest. Quietly. System first. Credit never." Clara froze. "But the board is welcome to decline," Amari cut in, "and be last in line when regulation becomes federal." A beat of silence. Then, to her credit, Clara did something rare. She nodded. "Understood." And just like that, a wall fell. Not with applause, but with quiet alignment. 3 hours later, Amari stood in front of her internal strategy team. No press, no social media. Just code, ethics, and infrastructure. "One down," said her CTO. "5 more to go," said someone else. Amari raised a hand. "No," she said. "This isn't about who joins next. It's about who leads next." They leaned in. "We don't need to dominate the industry. We need to shape what it means to operate inside it. We're not building walls, we're building standards." She paused. "That's harder, and it lasts longer." Across the country, something unusual was happening. Airlines began issuing internal memos about flight ethics culture, a phrase that hadn't existed 30 days ago. Passenger feedback portals were redesigned. Crew training manuals were rewritten. Even airport lounges began displaying digital signs. All passengers deserve dignity, regardless of status, seat, or silence. The shift wasn't total, but it was visible. Meanwhile, a photo from that day leaked to the press. Clara Hastings, leaving Unity Nexus. No handshake. No announcement. But reporters guessed what it meant. And the markets responded. Ascendant Air's stock didn't spike, but stabilized. And that was enough. Because now, survival required alignment with ethics. And Amari, she wasn't chasing partnerships. She was setting the cost of participation. Later that evening, Amari received a personal call. Not from a journalist, not from an airline. From Diane Fielding, the senator who'd once opposed her original Passenger Equity Act. "We're drafting new language," Diane said. "This time, we want you to write the preamble." Amari blinked. "You want the opening statement? We want the blueprint." And just like that, policy met power. At 2:17 a.m., Amari sat alone on her terrace in Newark, a cup of black tea in her hands. She didn't look at her phone. She didn't check the analytics. She just stared into the city where she was once a girl who didn't speak up in class, who sat in the back row of every classroom, of every flight. Until one day, someone told her she didn't belong in the front, and she decided to write the damn seating chart herself. Inside on her desk, under soft lamplight, lay a page that would change everything. Passenger Equity Act, 2025 Revision Draft Preamble, authored by Amari Pierce, CEO of Unity Nexus, Chair of the Federal Aviation Ethics Board, proposed. Below that, in bold, this act acknowledges that dignity cannot be assigned by seat number, flight status, or social proximity, and that justice, like safety, must be engineered into every journey. It started with a call from Geneva. Not a media call, not an airline, not a press opportunity. It was ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. They didn't want a headline. They wanted help. "We're not here to invite you to a panel, Ms. Pierce," the voice said. "We're here to discuss policy standardization across 41 member countries, specifically the Unity Ethics Compliance Layer." Amari didn't speak for a moment. She looked out the window of her Newark office, eyes landing on the skyline. This was no longer about a single airline, not even a nation. The code she wrote was becoming law. By midweek, she was on a jet to Ottawa for a closed-door session with the North American Aviation Coalition. This time, she didn't fly commercial. She flew with the federal delegation. Quiet. No press. Just her, a U.S. senator, and 2 advisors. Inside the jet, she reviewed a live dashboard of UCL integrations, 46 airlines, 58 airports, 3 regulatory frameworks already rewriting compliance rules around it. She didn't smile, not because she wasn't proud, but because she knew what was coming next. They'd try to take control, and they did. The Canadian official across from her leaned forward in the private briefing and said, "The platform is brilliant, but once it's absorbed into federal systems, Unity Nexus will have to step back. These things require neutral oversight." Amari's response was calm, controlled. "You don't get to borrow integrity and call it regulation." He shifted. "Ms. Pierce, this isn't personal. It's procedural. What you're proposing would rewrite half of aviation compliance worldwide. That can't be in the hands of a private entity." She looked him squarely in the eye. "Exactly. That's why I'm not selling it. I'm standardizing it." Later that night, she debriefed with her team from her hotel suite. James was already on Zoom, nodding. "They're scared we're building a shadow FAA." "We're not," Amari replied. "We're building a mirror." He raised a brow. "And when they see themselves in it, they'll either adjust or disappear." Meanwhile, Gregory Whitman was nowhere to be found. Rumors swirled. Costa Rica, Dubai, private rehab. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was that passengers around the world were activating the UCL interface mid-flight. What mattered was that more airlines were being flagged by real people in real time. And the data? It wasn't forgiving. One particular clip went viral. A Latina single mom in Buenos Aires, seated in business class, being asked to move for balance purposes. She tapped her Unity Ethics app, selected racial bias suspected, and within 90 seconds, the crew received a compliance alert from the airline's own server. That airline grounded the plane voluntarily within 12 minutes. Because now, failing ethics wasn't just a lawsuit risk, it was a logistics threat. Back in the States, Amari finally returned to her apartment. It was 3:12 a.m. Her heels hit the hardwood floor, coat still on. The city below was silent, and her phone buzzed. It was a text from her father. "Saw you on C-SPAN. You sounded like your mother." She didn't cry. She just sat down on the edge of her bed, opened her laptop, and pulled up the final draft of the Passenger Equity Act 2025. This time, it had co-sponsors, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, because dignity wasn't partisan. Later that morning, a private email arrived. Subject line, Invitation from the UN Council on Global Mobility Ethics. We are forming a global consortium. Your system is now the baseline. We'd like you to co-chair. She stared at it, let the weight of it land, and replied with 2 words, "Let's begin." At Unity Nexus HQ, her team had installed a new display in the main lobby. A curved wall showing live updates from UCL paired flights, which were flagged, which cleared, which required follow-up. A blinking line showed the latest entry. Flight 382, Oslo to Lisbon, flagged. Verbal bias, resolved in 8 and 42s underneath, in smaller font. System response verified, passenger dignity restored. It wasn't flashy, but it was reality. And that's what Amari had always been fighting for. Not a brand, not a moment, but a system. When she stepped into the lobby, the entire floor stood up. She didn't stop. She just raised one hand and said, "Eyes forward. Let's finish what we started." It started on Flight 1170 from Miami to San Juan. A teenage black girl, maybe 16, had quietly taken her assigned window seat in row 2B first class, paid for. Her curls were pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a Florida State hoodie and noise-canceling headphones. That's when the crew approached. "Miss, we need to verify your seat again. Can we see your boarding pass?" She calmly handed it over. They stared at it too long, whispered to each other. Then a voice leaned in with a smile that wasn't quite a smile. "You understand, sometimes errors happen. Would you mind relocating just a few rows back?" She didn't argue. She didn't yell. She just pressed record. The 68-second video uploaded under the caption, "Still happening." And this time, they didn't know who I was. By the time the plane landed, the video had crossed 4.3 million views. By nightfall, it hit 19 million. The girl never said her name. Never said a word, actually. Just recorded them, calmly, as the flight attendant gestured toward economy and a white couple settled into her now empty seat. Twitter was on fire. TikTok had a sound remix before noon. Hashtags poured in. Still flying while black Mar2B was hers. Where is Unity Nexus? But Unity Nexus said nothing. No statement, no reply, no official ethics flag update from their systems. And that's what triggered the real storm. Because silence felt like betrayal. In a downtown cafe in Seattle, a college junior named Amani posted, "Wait, Unity Nexus built the system to stop this. Why are they quiet now?" That tweet got 58,000 likes. Then others piled on. Where's the accountability system now? So Unity Nexus picks which injustice is worth reacting to. Do they only move when the passenger is rich? For 36 hours straight, Unity Nexus trended, for the wrong reason. Inside HQ, the mood was tense. But Amari, she was calm. She stood in front of her analytics wall, watching the numbers, watching what the public couldn't see. James spoke softly behind her. "We could flag the airline manually, push a protocol suspension." "No," Amari said. "People think we're ignoring it." She turned. "Let them think." He didn't understand. Not yet. At 3:42 p.m., something clicked. Without a single word from Amari's team, the airline involved, Flypath International, was automatically downgraded inside the ethics score index. Its score dropped from 3.8 to 2.3, triggering a cascade. Their access to 3 international hubs was suspended. Their ESG credit rating was flagged. A pending $680 million fleet renewal deal was paused by investors citing non-compliant ethics infrastructure. And Unity Nexus never said a word because the system spoke for itself. On Twitter, someone finally noticed. @Real Tasha May posted a screen. "Y'all, Flypath just got dropped from Heathrow in Toronto. Unity Nexus didn't respond, but their system did." The replies exploded. "They didn't abandon us. They made it automatic." "Yo, that's cold, quiet power." She didn't clap back. She coded karma. This is what systemic justice looks like. By morning, headlines shifted. Flypath faces global access freeze after ethics score crash. Unity Nexus silent, yet unstoppable. Passengers no longer need to scream to be heard. The system sees them. The teen girl never came forward, never released a name. She didn't need to, because now the system protected her, whether she was famous or not. In her office, Amari watched the story unfold like weather. Not a storm she controlled, just one she'd predicted. She turned to her board of directors. This is why we don't jump into every fire. We don't perform justice, we embed it. Someone asked, should we still release a public comment? Amari shook her head. The point of a system is that it doesn't need us in the room. 2 days later, a reporter caught her outside the building. Ms. Pierce, can we ask, why didn't Unity Nexus speak out sooner? She paused, looked directly at the lens. Because some systems shouldn't scream to be believed. And with that, she walked away. In Toronto, Flypath's gate was shut down. In Paris, Air Ethics posted an update. Flypath temporarily suspended from gate fare protocol. In Tokyo, a passenger in row 5C quietly opened her app and saw a message. Your rights are protected. Ethics system active. She didn't even know what had happened in Miami. She just exhaled and relaxed into her seat. Back in Newark, Amari received a private email from the teenage girl's mother. It read, we didn't think anyone would believe her, but your silence said everything. Amari didn't forward it, didn't save it to a folder. She just read it, then got back to work. Because this wasn't about one girl or one flight. This was about the next 100,000 girls like her, who would now sit in 2B, 1A, or 34F, without ever needing to explain why they belonged there. The email came encrypted, no header, no signature, just a subject line. Request for coordination, level gray. Amari had seen that phrase before. It wasn't public, it wasn't standard. It was used only when airports, not airlines, wanted to negotiate quietly, off the record, behind the curtain. This time, it was Midway International. The next morning, she took the meeting. Not virtual, in person, private terminal, no press. Inside a glass conference room with tinted walls, the airport's chief of operations leaned in, almost whispering. We've had a spike in flagged reports, most coming from gate 14 through 21. International terminal, mostly black and brown passengers. Amari nodded, already knowing. And your ask? He hesitated. We'd like Unity Nexus to temporarily pause live ethics scoring on those gates. Give us 72 hours to retrain and review before public logs go out. Amari just looked at him. Not angry, not surprised, just done. So you want me to blind the system, to delay accountability? No, it's about proportional rollout. We weren't ready for this level of real-time transparency. She leaned forward. Passengers were never ready for your bias either, but here we are. He sighed. If this hits the press, Midway could lose 3 major airline contracts. International carriers are already on edge. Good, Amari said, standing up. Maybe they should be. Back in Newark, Amari returned to her war room and tapped a single command. Public transparency mode. Activated location. Midway International duration. Indefinite within 30 minutes, something that had never happened before occurred. An entire airport's ethics score system went dark. Not paused, not adjusted. Suspended. Reporters noticed first, then policy watchdogs, then Twitter. A trending post read, why did Unity Nexus black out Midway's gate scores? Amari didn't release a statement. She didn't need to, because exactly 24 hours later, the reports auto-published. Over 900 data entries flagged within the past 6 months. More than 600 involved repeated profiling or unjustified questioning. 87% of flagged passengers were Black, Latino, or Muslim. At Gate 18 alone, 42 separate passengers were asked to re-verify documents, despite having cleared federal screening. Most of them, women, and nearly all of them, American citizens. The backlash was nuclear. Civil rights groups launched formal complaints. International travelers began posting their stories. An anonymous staffer leaked an internal memo from Midway's HR department. Ensure all gate agents remain calm during current optics issue. Do not refer to Unity Nexus by name when questioned by press. That line alone was reprinted in over 700 news articles within 2 days. Then came the bombshell. Senator Clara Moreno called a congressional hearing on passenger equity and gate profiling practices. And the first person subpoenaed to speak, Amari Pierce. Backstage before the hearing, her assistant adjusted her jacket. "You ready for this?" "I've been ready," Amari said. "They just weren't listening before." Inside the room, it was packed. Cameras, reporters, lawmakers. Senator Moreno spoke first. "Ms. Pierce, the country wants to know, why now? Why Midway? Why this level of escalation?" Amari spoke calmly into the microphone. "Because silence isn't neutrality, and pattern is proof." Gasps in the room. "We're not hunting mistakes. We're tracking behavior. And what we've seen, at Midway and elsewhere, is not random. It's embedded." Senator Moreno paused, then asked the golden question. "And what would you propose as the solution?" Amari didn't blink. "Make UCL compliance mandatory for federal airport funding. No ethics protocol, no access to tax dollars." The room froze. Some senators looked shocked. Some leaned back. But Senator Moreno smiled. "I think that's a conversation we're overdue for." By the time Amari walked out of the chamber, the footage had gone viral. Not the scandal. Her calm, her tone, her refusal to flinch. Clips were posted with captions like, "This is what accountability without anger looks like." Black excellence doesn't need to shout. She didn't name names, she named patterns. Back at Unity Nexus, Amari's inbox was exploding. International airports offering to pre-register for the new gate fare standard. 2 more airlines voluntarily submitting for ethics audits. Even a chain of airport lounges requested to license Unity's passenger fairness tools. And all Amari did was tell the truth. That night, she sat in her office, alone. The skyline twinkled outside. She opened a file labeled FAA Integration Draft, Internal Use Only. Under the header, Passenger Ethics Act, Federal Implementation Package Proposal. And beneath it, her notes in plain font. Phase 1, Airport Compliance. Phase 2, Airline Transparency. Phase 3, Passenger Dignity Engineered at Every Gate. She didn't hit send. Not yet. Because first, she'd make sure no one ever had to ask for permission to be treated like a human being again. It always starts with a whisper. The first signs weren't public. They never are. It came as a meeting cancellation. Then a delay in contract sign-offs. Then silence from agencies that had once cheered Amari Pierce as the voice of ethical aviation. Then, late one Thursday night, an email. Leaked from a junior legislative staffer who believed she deserved to know. They've drafted a provision, buried in the Transportation Oversight Amendment, Section 48C, designed to separate ethical governance from private infrastructure. You're the target, Amari. She sat in the dark with her laptop open. No tears, no panic, just a sinking clarity. This wasn't about ethics. This was about power. And she'd built something they could no longer control. So they wanted it gone. The next morning, James burst into her office holding a printout. Section 48C. If this passes, Unity Nexus loses federal partnerships. They're calling it a realignment of oversight frameworks. She read it, slowly, word by word. Then looked up and said, "They want our system without our standards. They want to use UCL, but strip its teeth. They think we won't fight back?" She stood up, eyes clear. "They think I'll play polite." 3 hours later, Amari made a call. Not to a lawyer, not to a PR team. She called Senator Clara Moreno. "I need another hearing, public, and I won't just talk this time. I'll show everything." On the day of the hearing, she didn't wear black. She wore white. A suit her mother had tailored for her 10 years ago, the one she'd saved for her biggest fight. And this time, she didn't wait to be asked questions. She began with her own. "Do you know how many acts of racial discrimination were prevented in the past 3 weeks because of the UCL system?" The room stilled. Amari tapped her screen. Behind her, the data went live. 437 verified de-escalations. 231 self-resolved by crew after receiving alerts. 91 resulted in crew retraining. 19 resulted in suspended partnerships. She turned to face the senators. This wasn't performative justice. This was prevention. This wasn't just software. It was structural change. C-SPAN aired it live. CNN looped the highlights every hour. But it wasn't her numbers that shook the country. It was the footage she played next. Clips. Quiet. Raw. A South Asian grandmother being told to step aside at boarding until an alert pinged and the crew corrected course. A black teenager stopped from entering first class, then allowed through after a silent compliance notification. A Muslim man asked to verify his documents until another passenger triggered a bias suspected report. The agent apologized. On camera, none of them had shouted. None had gone viral. Because this time, the system stopped the harm before it became spectacle. The final image was simple. A 6-year-old Latina girl seated peacefully in 1A, coloring. Below it, flagged for relocation. System intervened. Dignity preserved. Amari turned off the screen. You want to dismantle this? For what? So bias can be quiet again? A hush fell across the chamber. Then one senator spoke. Ms. Pierce, we weren't aware the numbers were this clear. Amari didn't flinch. Because the system isn't about looking good, it's about making sure others aren't looked down on. By evening, Strike Down 48C was trending across every platform. Airlines that had lobbied for the amendment began backpedaling. One CEO even posted, "We underestimated what Unity Nexus stood for. We stand corrected." Within 72 hours, the amendment was withdrawn. And in a twist no one expected, the Senate introduced a new bill, the Passenger Equity Infrastructure Act. Its first provision? The UCL system shall serve as the ethical standard framework across all federally funded airports and flight operators. That night, Amari sat alone on her balcony. No champagne, just water and quiet. James texted, "You did it." She didn't reply, because it wasn't done. It had just begun. Downstairs in the Unity Nexus lobby, the wall of live ethics responses blinked gently. Each row a flight. Each entry a moment dignity was either violated or protected. And in the corner, a small engraved plaque had been installed. Passenger dignity isn't optional. It's operational. AP. The rain had stopped by sunrise. And in the glow of early light, Amari stood on the steps of the Capitol, quiet, still, watching the flags ripple in silence. Inside, the chamber echoed with applause. It was official. UCL Unity Compliance Layer had been adopted as the nationwide standard for aviation ethics. The rollout would begin at 122 airports. Phase 2 would expand to 9 major train hubs and 4 seaports. And in the final phase, UCL would become the global benchmark, endorsed by 5 international transportation alliances. But this morning, Amari wasn't thinking about systems. She was thinking about people. Inside the chamber, senators filed out one by one, pausing to shake her hand. Some tried to pitch buyout offers again. Others hinted at strategic alignment. And one even said, "You know, Ms. Pierce, this platform could make you a billionaire twice over if you let the right people manage it." She smiled politely. "I didn't build it to sell. I built it so passengers stop being sold short." Later that day, a woman approached her outside the Capitol. Mid-30s, braided hair, holding a tablet. "My daughter asked me to give this to you." It was a video. The girl couldn't have been more than 15. Brown skin, book bag, glasses too big for her face. She sat in what looked like a middle school hallway and spoke directly to the camera. "Hi, my name is Layla. I don't know if this will reach you, but thank you. I flew alone last week from Charlotte to Boston, and someone tried to move me from my seat in first class. I pressed that ethics button, and the flight attendant apologized. I didn't cry this time. I didn't have to prove I belonged. She smiled shyly. "I want to build something like you one day. Something that makes silence safer." Amari's throat tightened. She pressed pause. And for the first time in weeks, she sat down and let herself feel the full weight of what she had started. Back at Unity Nexus HQ, the mood was different, lighter, focused. The team was already mapping integration with non-airline sectors, public buses, university campuses, even immigration checkpoints. But Amari had something else in mind. She tapped the conference table. "We need a separate protocol, not for adults, not for government, for kids." The room went still. James leaned forward. "You mean like a youth UCL?" "No," Amari replied. "I mean something simpler. Something a 9-year-old can use without fear. One button, one icon, one outcome. Safety." They called it UCL Junior. Same logic. New interface. Child-proofed. Voice-activated. Symbol-based. Amari wanted no text, no legal language, just signals kids could trust. The icon? A small open hand. Green for safe, red for alert. Linked quietly to crew dashboards, parent contacts, and third-party monitors. The beta version launched in just under 3 months. On its first day live, a message came in. A 12-year-old boy on a flight to Phoenix had pressed the red hand icon after being told by a seatmate he must be lost. The crew was notified silently. No scene, no panic. They offered the boy a snack, checked his seat again, and the man next to him was asked to move for balance. No drama, no headlines, but the boy smiled and stayed in his seat. Later that night, Amari sat in her office, lights low. She opened a new file, Flight Dignity for Minors, Proposal 2026. Under it, she wrote, "Every child should know they are worthy of space, even before they know the laws that protect it." She saved the draft, then checked the live dashboard one more time. In the corner of a small terminal in Atlanta, a young black girl sat near Gate 3. She wore a pink hoodie and cradled a stuffed owl. Behind her, the digital sign updated. Passenger Ethics Protocol, active. Dignity in progress. She didn't know who Amari Pierce was. She didn't know what Congress had passed, but she sat still, unbothered, unmoved. And when the gate agent smiled and scanned her ticket, no one questioned her name, her seat, or her right to be there. The future was no longer coming. It had arrived. 1 year later. The world had shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, but definitively. You could see it in the way people moved through terminals. The pauses were shorter, the stares fewer, the weight of expectation lighter. At last count, 212 airports across 38 countries had fully adopted the UCL ethics system. Passenger dignity had gone from a slogan to a setting. Even the airline that once lobbied to dismantle UCL quietly returned. Sky Horizon International, which once claimed the system compromised operational autonomy, had submitted full paperwork for reintegration. No press release, no announcement, just a quiet application stamped reconsideration request, full partnership. James had shown Amari the file with a smirk. They didn't even change the font. She had only nodded. "The system works, even on those who once fought it." But Amari didn't celebrate with press conferences. No interviews. No panels. She had stepped back from the spotlight the moment the Senate signed the Passenger Equity Infrastructure Act into law. Because the victory wasn't in her name. It was in every gate where a child wasn't questioned, in every boarding lane where no one was asked to explain their skin. And yet, there was one thing she still needed to do. One place she hadn't been. Terminal 2, Gate B6, O'Hare Airport, Chicago. A mid-sized domestic terminal. Nothing flashy. The kind of gate where the worst stories often began. Small, ignored, outside media attention. Amari entered quietly. No security detail, no entourage. Just a denim jacket, soft curls tucked into a cap, and her boarding pass under the name A. Raynor. She chose this gate on purpose. This was where, years ago, her best friend had been told to step aside because that seat looks too premium. Her friend never flew again. She sat in row 2, just near the boarding lane. Across from her, a family of 4 waited. Black parents, 2 boys with Nintendo Switches. A gate agent glanced over. Then, something happened. A well-dressed white woman approached the counter, gesturing back toward the family. The agent leaned in, listened, then walked toward them. "Sir, I need to verify your seats again. There's been a potential reallocation." The father blinked. "We checked in already. Is there a problem?" The agent's hand hovered over her tablet. But then, the screen blinked. Red, then blue, then green. The UCL system flashed a soft notification. Bias flagged. Secondary review suggested. The agent froze, looked down, took a breath, then straightened her posture. "Apologies for the confusion. Your seats are confirmed. Thank you for your patience." She turned to the woman still hovering behind and added firmly, "Please remain in the standby queue as assigned." The woman pursed her lips, muttered something under her breath, and walked away. The family, still seated, still calm, untouched. Amari didn't move. She just watched how something small, so small, could have become something painful, and how now it didn't. Not because of her presence, not because of fear, but because the system itself now held the line. The gate agent returned to her station, checked the manifest again, and for a moment, Amari thought, maybe she saw something in the agent's eyes. A flicker, a second glance, but nothing was said, and that was perfect. Later, on board the short flight to Cleveland, a little boy in row 3 dropped his juice box. It spilled across the aisle toward Amari's foot. He looked horrified. I didn't mean..." Amari smiled gently. "It's okay, baby. Happens." His mother whispered a thank you. She didn't know who Amari was, but the look in her eyes, the relief, said enough. No one was going to lecture her today, or assume anything, or ask her to move, because the climate had changed. Back in her hotel room that night, Amari opened her laptop. There was a single message from the UCL public portal. "We logged 18,022 ethical affirmations today, and 0 removals from assigned seats triggered by bias." She stared at it for a long moment, then whispered, "That's all I ever wanted." On her bedside table sat a small envelope. From Layla, the teen girl who sent the video message a year ago. Amari had never responded publicly, but she had sent her something quietly. A starter code kit, a journal, and a note. "Build systems that outlive you. That's where legacy begins." Layla had written back with one line, "Then let's start coding." Outside her window, the city moved on. Planes lifted quietly into the night. Tires rolled down runways. Families held tickets, not fear. And in the corner of every screen across every gate, the same 3 words lit up in green: dignity and progress. Not complete, not perfect, but working and watching. What if one quiet system, or one right choice, could change an entire flight, an entire industry, or even a child's entire life? We want to hear from you. Have you or someone you love ever been made to prove you belonged, just because of your skin color, your voice, or where you were sitting? Drop your story below. Or just write, "I've seen it, I understand." And as always, tell us where you're watching from. Our community spans the globe, but our voices are strongest when we rise together. Until dignity becomes default, we keep building.